Imagine a land baked by the sun, where the hills of Judea rise and fall like the breath of the earth, where the winds carry whispers of ancient promises, and the stars above seem to sing of a God who sees all. This is the world where our story begins, a tapestry woven from the threads of courage, faith, and the unrelenting love of the divine. Picture a young shepherd boy, his name David, barely 16, with a sling draped over his shoulder and a heart that burned with a fire no one else could see. His hands were calloused from tending sheep, his eyes sharp from scanning the horizon for wolves, but his soul was tethered to a truth far greater than the hills he roamed. David lived in a time of fear, when the armies of Israel cowered before a giant named Goliath, a Philistine warrior whose shadow seemed to swallow the valley of Elah whole. Goliath stood over 9 feet tall, his armor gleaming like a molten river, his spear as thick as a weaver's beam, and his voice a thunder that made men's knees buckle. Every morning, he strode before the Israelite camp, mocking their God, daring anyone to face him. "Send me a champion," he roared, his laughter echoing off the cliffs. "Or bow to us and serve." The soldiers of Israel, seasoned men with swords and shields, shrank back, their courage drained by the sheer impossibility of the task. But David, this boy who sang psalms to his sheep under the stars, heard something different in Goliath's taunts, not a challenge to men, but an insult to the God he loved. His brothers, older and battle-worn, scoffed when he arrived at the camp with bread and cheese from their father. "Go back to your flock, little one," they sneered. "This is no place for dreamers." Yet David's heart stirred, not with arrogance, but with a certainty that the God who had delivered him from the jaws of lions would not abandon his people now. He stepped before King Saul, a man whose crown sat heavy with doubt, and said, "Let no one lose heart because of this giant. I will go and fight him." Saul laughed, a hollow sound, but there was something in David's eyes, a spark, a conviction, that made him pause. He offered the boy his armor, a breastplate that hung like a yoke on David's slender frame, but David refused it. "I cannot fight with these," he said, and instead he knelt by a stream, choosing 5 smooth stones, each one fitting perfectly in his palm, as if the earth itself had crafted them for this moment. The valley was silent as David walked toward Goliath, the giant's laughter booming like a storm. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" Goliath mocked, but David's voice rang clear, unshaken. "You come with sword and spear, but I come in the name of the Lord Almighty, whom you have defied. This day he will deliver you into my hands." With a single motion, David slung a stone, and it flew like a comet, striking Goliath between the eyes. The giant fell, the mountain crumbled, and the Philistines fled as Israel's army roared in triumph. David, the shepherd boy, had done what no warrior dared, not by his strength, but by a faith that moved mountains. Word of David's victory spread like wildfire, and soon the people sang his name, their hearts lifted by the reminder that God's power could shine through the humblest of vessels. But this was only the beginning, for the land of Israel was a place of endless trials, where faith was tested not just in battle, but in the quiet moments of hunger, doubt, and longing. Far from the valley of Elah, in a village by the Sea of Galilee, another story was unfolding, one that would echo David's courage in a different way. The people were weary, their bellies empty, their spirits worn thin by the weight of Roman rule and the struggle to survive. They had heard of a teacher, a man named Jesus, whose words seemed to pierce the soul, whose touch could heal the broken. Crowds followed him, thousands strong, drawn by stories of miracles, a blind man given sight, a lame man walking, a demon cast out. On this day they gathered on a hillside, their faces etched with hope and desperation, hanging on his every word. Jesus spoke of a kingdom not of this world, a kingdom where the poor were blessed, where the meek would inherit the earth, where love was stronger than hate. His disciples, a ragtag group of fishermen and tax collectors, watched in awe as the crowd swelled to 5,000, men, women, and children, all hungry for more than words. As the sun dipped low, the disciples grew anxious. "Teacher," they said, "send them away. There's no food here, and night is coming." But Jesus looked at them, his eyes gentle yet piercing, and said, "You give them something to eat." They stammered, pointing to a boy who had offered his lunch, 5 loaves of barley bread and 2 small fish. "This is all we have," they said, "and it's nothing for so many." Jesus smiled, a smile that held the secrets of the stars, and told them to have the people sit on the grass. He took the loaves and fish, lifted them to the heavens, and gave thanks to his Father. Then he began to break the bread and the fish, and somehow, impossibly, there was more. The disciples carried basket after basket, their hands trembling as they fed the multitude, and when every person had eaten their fill, 12 baskets of fragments remained. The crowd gasped, their hearts ablaze with wonder, for they had seen the hand of God move in their midst. Jesus did not seek their praise. He slipped away to pray, leaving the people to ponder the miracle of a God who provides, who sees their need, who multiplies the little they have into abundance. This moment, like David's stone, was a spark that lit a fire, a testament to a God who works through the small, the ordinary, to accomplish the extraordinary. Yet not all who heard of God's power were ready to receive it, and the story of faith is often a story of struggle, of running from the call that burns within. Across the sea, in a port city called Joppa, lived a man named Jonah, a prophet whose heart was as stormy as the waves that crashed against the shore. God spoke to Jonah, his voice clear as a bell. "Go to Nineveh, that great city, and warn them of their wickedness, for their sins have reached my ears." But Nineveh was a place of enemies, a city of Assyrians who had crushed nations, and Jonah's heart recoiled at the thought of offering them mercy. He turned from God's voice, boarding a ship bound for Tarshish, as far from Nineveh as he could flee. The sea, though, was not his ally. A storm rose, fierce and unrelenting, the waves tossing the ship like a leaf. The sailors cried out to their gods, but the tempest grew wilder, and Jonah, heavy with guilt, confessed, "This storm is because of me. Throw me into the sea, and it will calm." The sailors hesitated, but the storm left them no choice. They cast Jonah overboard, and the waves stilled, the sky clearing as if the heavens themselves had sighed in relief. But God was not done with Jonah. A great fish, its jaws wide as a cave, swallowed him whole, and for 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah sat in the belly of the beast, his heart wrestling with his rebellion. In the darkness he prayed, his voice raw with repentance. "I called out to the Lord in my distress, and he answered me. From the depths of the grave, I cried, and you heard my voice." On the 3rd day, the fish spat Jonah onto dry land, and this time he obeyed. He walked to Nineveh, his sandals caked with dust, and proclaimed, 40 days, and Nineveh will be destroyed." To his astonishment, the people listened. From the king to the lowliest servant, they fasted, donned sackcloth, and turned from their evil ways. God saw their repentance and spared the city, and Jonah, though he struggled with God's mercy, learned that the heart of the Almighty is wider than human understanding, that his love extends even to those we call enemies. The story of Jonah rippled outward, a reminder that God's call cannot be outrun, that his mercy is a tide that lifts all who turn to him. But the journey of faith is never without its trials, and far from Nineveh, in the shadow of Egypt's pyramids, another story had unfolded centuries before, one that shaped the very soul of Israel. The people of God, descendants of Abraham, groaned under the whip of Pharaoh, their backs bent in slavery, their cries rising to the heavens. Among them was a man named Moses, born in secret, hidden in a basket among the reeds of the Nile to escape Pharaoh's decree that all Hebrew boys be killed. Raised as a prince, Moses fled Egypt after killing a taskmaster, his heart torn between his Hebrew blood and his royal upbringing. In the wilderness of Midian he tended sheep, a fugitive far from the palaces of his youth, until God spoke from a burning bush, a flame that danced but did not consume. "I have seen the misery of my people," God said, "and I have come to deliver them. Go to Pharaoh and say, 'Let my people go.'" Moses trembled, his tongue stumbling, his heart heavy with doubt. "Who am I to do this?" he asked, but God's voice was unshaken. "I will be with you." With his brother Aaron at his side, Moses returned to Egypt, standing before Pharaoh, whose heart was as hard as the stone of his pyramids. "Let my people go," Moses demanded, but Pharaoh laughed, tightening his grip on the Hebrews. So God sent signs, 10 plagues that shook the land, rivers turned to blood, frogs and locusts, darkness that smothered the sun. With each plague, Pharaoh's resolve wavered, only to harden again, until the final, terrible blow, the death of every firstborn in Egypt, spared only in the homes marked by the blood of a lamb. That night, the Hebrews fled, their bread unleavened, their hearts pounding as they marched toward freedom. Pharaoh pursued, his chariots thundering, but God parted the Red Sea, a wall of water on either side, and the Hebrews crossed on dry ground. When Pharaoh's army followed, the waters collapsed, swallowing their pride and power. On the other shore, Moses and his sister Miriam sang of deliverance, their voices rising like a tide. "The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation." The story of Moses became a cornerstone of Israel's faith, a testament to a God who hears the cries of the oppressed, who breaks the chains of slavery, who leads his people through the impossible. Yet faith is not a moment, but a journey, And the lessons of these stories, David's courage, Jesus' compassion, Jonah's repentance, Moses' deliverance, found their fullest expression on a hillside in Galilee, where Jesus sat among the crowds, his voice weaving a vision of a world made new. The people gathered, their hearts hungry for hope, and Jesus spoke words that would echo through the ages. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. He taught them to love their enemies, to pray for those who curse them, to forgive not once but 70 times 7. Do not store up treasures on earth, he said, where moths and rust destroy, but store up treasures in heaven, where nothing can take them away. He spoke of a Father who sees in secret, who knows every sparrow that falls, who clothes the lilies of the field in splendor. Seek first his kingdom, Jesus said, and all these things will be given to you. The crowd sat in silence, their hearts stirred by a truth they could scarcely grasp, a truth that called them to live not for themselves, but for others, to trust not in their strength, but in God's. As the sun set, casting golden light across the hillside, Jesus' words lingered, a beacon for all who would follow, a call to walk the narrow path of faith, love, and sacrifice. The stories of David, Jesus, Jonah, and Moses are not separate tales, but threads in a single tapestry, each one revealing a facet of the God who created the heavens and the earth. David showed us that faith can slay giants, that a heart surrendered to God is mightier than any sword. Jesus showed us that love can feed a multitude, that the smallest offering, given in faith, can become more than enough. Jonah showed us that God's mercy knows no bounds, that even those who run from him are never beyond his reach. Moses showed us that God hears the cries of his people, that he will part the seas to lead them home. And on that hillside, Jesus wove these truths into a vision of a kingdom where the broken are made whole, where the lost are found, where the humble are lifted high. This is the story of faith, a story that began in the dust of Judea and continues in every heart that dares to believe. It is a story of a God who sees, who loves, who calls us to be more than we are, to walk with him through the valleys and the storms, to trust that he is weaving a story far greater than we can imagine. So let us walk this path, with the courage of David, the compassion of Jesus, the repentance of Jonah, the steadfastness of Moses, and the hope of a kingdom that will never fade. For in the end, it is not our strength that matters, but his, not our plans, but his purpose, not our story, but the one he is writing through us all.